we'll look at this in a second. As you were doing, the homework assignment went okay? How many of you used the an online interpreter or something versus downloaded your own editor and that kind of stuff? Used the online thing? Anybody bring up their own environment on their own machine with an interpreter and stuff? With a text editor? All right, well, I'm going to do that today just to show you maybe a little bit better way of doing it. If you wanted to use an online thing, in fact, did I give you a link to like Python, an online Python thing like this? There's one in the book too, but I think I gave you this one. So it makes it, fairly easy for you to write some stuff. So if I type in here, there's the quiz. All right, so add nums, takes two parameters, adds them together, and returns the answer. And then if I call add nums, what did I say, 1 and 3? I'm going to say answer is equal to add nums 1 and 3. Then we'll print out answer. How do you run this one? Oh, you say execute. Oh, forgot my colon. That's actually the solution. So there's my 4, 1 and 3. And I don't remember what I did for the other one. What, 3 and 5 or something? It works for any two numbers. Put them in there. Okay. Now, this thing's actually fine. In fact, that actually worked better than I thought it would. But I like to use an online editor. And let me see my own editor that does some color coding and stuff. Let's see, do I have Adam on here? I do. So a tool I use is called Atom. There's plenty of text editors out there. So you can use Atom, you can use Sublime, you can use Notepad, whatever you want. Just a lot of times you just do a Google search like best Python text editor or something like that. It'll bring up a whole bunch of different ones. So here, well, that's from January 14 or 2013. Let's throw a date on this, 2018. All right, so Pycharm is one, PyDev is another. These have Python built into it. Wing, that sounds kind of stupid. Oh, Vim, that's an interesting. Oh, Visual Studio does support, so there's a Visual Studio for Mac and Visual Studio for Windows that supports Python syntax. Here's Atom on that list. Sublime is probably on here somewhere.
Can you actually run this in
Huh?
Python? So can you run it in Atom though?
Can I run Python directly in Atom? No. You write your text in Atom, then you save it, and you go out and run it from the command line, which I prefer doing that, but we'll talk about the difference. So in fact, here, I'll actually mention it here. So the very first one here, they're mentioning Python IDE. Let's see, let me just blow it up here. So you write all your code in here, and it helps indentation and stuff like that. But then at the top, it has a little play button. When you're ready to run it, you hit the play button, and it runs it. Pretty similar to what we just did on that web page. Now that's fine. There's not a big problem with doing that, but I actually prefer to run the code manually. I like to have the text editor do the text editing stuff with Python, and then I like to run it from the command line, at least when you're first learning it. That way you kind of get that feel of the cadence of write your code, save your code, run it through the interpreter over and over and over again. And then once you get used to that, you can use one of these IDEs. So that's called Python IDE. Here, let's just see. Do they have a Mac one, or is it just? Yeah, they have a Mac one. Oh, heck, you want to use this one to make you happy? This is that Pycharm dealie I just clicked on, and they have a community version of this. Free open source for Mac OS. So if I hit download, let's just see what this guy looks like. It doesn't look like I actually have to agree to anything. You already started downloading. So we'll go ahead and put that. While that guy's running, let me just give you a quick demo of Atom real quick, the way I usually would do it. So here's Atom. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create I'm going to close a lot of these guys here. And I'm just going to create a new file. I'm going to go ahead and save this file. I'll put it in, actually, I'll just put it in, I'll put it on the desktop. Do I want desktop? I can't decide. No, I'm going to put it in my downloads folder just because it's going to be pretty much a throwaway thing. I don't want it to clutter stuff up. So we're going to call this guy CSC535.py. Just the name of the file. Py is for a Python file. Save that guy. Is that big enough text, or you want it a little bigger? Can I make it bigger in here? Is that good? We read that from the back? All right, so I'll go ahead and say def add nums a comma b colon. This guy goes ahead and indents it underneath it for you. I'll say return a plus b. All right, then I'll call add nums. Well, I'll call print add nums 1 comma 3. Print add nums 3 comma 5. And you don't use semicolons in this language. Go ahead and save that. So that's saved in my downloads folder in a file called CSC535. If you go to, I think it's called python.org. You can download Python source code or the Python executable. So if you want Python 3, because there's kind of two development lines for Python. There's some Python 3 and Python 2. Some people still use Python 2. Our book is for Python 3, so you want to download Python 3. This guy right here. If you're on a Windows machine, you'll do the same thing. Install it. Windows will give you a Python terminal type thing, like a double thing you can double click on that'll look sort of like this guy. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and run my Python program. 535.py. So I'm going to run that through the Python interpreter. So there's my 4 and my 8. Okay, so type it in one place, run it someplace else. Now let's go check out this Pycharm dealio. See what all the hype is about. So I'll install that in my applications folder. I assume on a Windows machine you'll just double click setup and it'll do its thing. All right, so I'll go ahead and open this guy up. Are you sure you want to open it? Yes. Just close this guy. Do not import anything. JetBrains policy. I've read that and I accept it. Set theme. Which looks better to the audience? Dark stuff or lighter? Dark looks better out there? Okay. Darkula. That'll actually help me today. I have a crazy headache. I don't know why. All right, so we'll hit next. Next. Okay. This is just some extra stuff. It already has Python support. So Bash is like a Linux shell thing. R is a Java-based thing. So just click start using Pycharm, I assume. All right, so let's create a new project here. CSC535. Base interpreter, we need to change that to, on mine, I need to, oh, hold on a second. I got to check something here real quick. No. Let's see. -v Python -v. Okay, so I'm running 2.7 on here. I mentioned that you should run Python 3. All right, so rather than using the default Python that's built in here, I'm going to go to downloads. I'll download Python 3.64, latest, greatest, whatever. This should install it next to my Python 2.7. They don't overwrite each other, or it shouldn't overwrite each other. So you'll want to do this on your machine as well, if you want to have a local development environment. Otherwise, you could just keep using the online thing you used before. All right, so I'm installing Python. I agree with everything. Very exciting. All right, so that guy is done being installed. Let's go back to this. Let's choose the base interpreter. Might need to go back a page if it doesn't let me. Okay, so now I have a Python 3. That guy should be Python 3.6.4. That's the one I just installed, as opposed to 2.7.10, which was the other one. All right, so this installs it in local bin Python 3. Okay, so I'm going to go and browse to the base interpreter. So that is /user local bin Python 3. So make sure you set your base interpreter in your machine to wherever you installed Python 3. If you're on a Mac, it'll be user local bin Python 3. If you're on a PC, it'll probably be /program files /Python, whatever. All right, just make sure you choose Python 3. What'll be frustrating is if you don't, about 85% of the stuff we do in here, maybe even 90% will work just fine. But there's certain little idiosyncrasies between Python 2 and Python 3 where something will work one way in Python 3 but won't work in Python 2 and vice versa. So your life will be easier if you just make sure you're using Python 3. Okay? Wouldn't have made a difference in this first homework assignment just because we aren't doing anything special. Okay, so I'll go ahead and hit create. And this is creating my project, presumably. Oh, very exciting. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I assume I can right click and say new file. We'll call this guy test.py. Oh, hold on. That's way too tiny. I need to. I got a preferences. Appearance. editor, font, size. Is that big enough? We're good? All right. So let's just test this thing and make sure it does what we want it to do. So we'll say def add nums a comma b colon return a plus b. All right, then we'll call that add nums 1 3. This should give us a 4. Oh, it expects 2 blank lines for it to run correctly. It's interesting. Seems very picky. I have to choose a configuration. Defaults. Python. Okay. I already don't like this. It's like extra stuff. It might want us to do, let me just see something here real quick. I think it's underscore, underscore, main, underscore, underscore. It still doesn't like it. Create a new configuration. Where's my plus button? Plus button. I want to create a Python. Python 6. Please specify script name. Apply. Yeah, this sucks. Apparently it's pretty popular, so I've never used it before. Doing the built-in thing, I don't really like.
I'm curious if you have a Python on your computer, do you just open up the Python shell, the Python free shell?
On your Windows, yeah, you open up the shell, that'll give you it looks like a DOS prompt.
Right.
So you edit it in whatever editor you want. You can use Atom or Sublime. Pick your favorite text editor. There's a whole bunch of them. Atom's pretty popular, ATOM. So if you go to Atom text editor.
I actually use Atom, but I'm trying to figure out how to actually run it from the
Right, I get it. I'm just kind of showing for everybody else. So for everybody else, I'd really strongly recommend you use the Atom editor. It's atom.io. It's available for Mac and PC and all that stuff. This is just a text editor. Has nothing to do with Python specifically, except it will color code for Python. And then once you have that, when you double click on your Python thing, you get something that looks like this, right? It looks kind of like this. Now, if you type in ls and press enter, does anything happen, or say command not found?
It says trace back most recent call last.
Okay, type dir and press enter. That gives you a thing?
Built-in function dir.
No built-in function, or is it?
No, it just says built-in function
Oh, I know what the problem is. You are you have two little dashes at the line. You have something that looks like that.
Yes, 3 of them.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because so you're actually running the Python interpreter right now when you double click on that.
Oh,
So if you were to type in something like print hello world or something like that, it would print out hello world. It would respond to Python commands. So actually, what you want to do is let me see.
make sure that it does.
Python. You already have a file, and did you name it .py?
Yes.
Go where your file is.
Mhm.
Do you see it on there, on your computer?
Yeah.
Does it look like a Python icon?
No.
Try double clicking it.
Oh, actually, well, it just okay. Then,
And see if it asks you what program to open it with.
it's actually trying to open it with Xcode. Yeah, it opened it with Xcode.
All right, close that. Right click on the file and say open with, and then browse to your Python thing you installed.
I don't.
Say this again.
IDLE.
That might be what it's called, because I think that's that might be the IDE for it.
Yeah, there's one that says IDLE, and then there's one that says Python launcher, but I think I'm gonna go with IDLE.
I think the Python launcher is actually what you want.
Okay.
Because that will run that thing using Python. We could always change it if it didn't work this time.
Okay.
So we're just changing the default program, so it's no longer Visual Studio. Now it'll be Python launcher.
Okay.
And now double click on it. And did it run this time?
I just ran it, and it's yes, you're right.
It gave you output or whatever.
Yeah, it just kind of looks like this.
Okay. But it did what you expected your program to do. All right. So what he had to do on Windows is once you name a file something.python, so if I go into, let's go into my Finder here, pretend like you're on Windows here, and I go to downloads, and I have this icon here, CSC535.py. He right-clicked with that on that and said open with. Yeah, so this has the same thing, the IDLE guy here. But you should have something in your list if you've installed Python on your machine called the Python launcher. Choose Python launcher. And from that point forward, you can just double click on it and it'll open in there. I think opening it in IDLE will run it through Python. So it gives you something that looks like this that I think also that has a run button up top here. But I never use this. I don't like that setup. So use the Python launcher, and I think you'll be happier. Okay, so pick your poison. If you just like using the website or whatever you used last time, that'll probably be okay. All right, so let's go and solve some stuff from the homework assignment. So I'm going to go into Atom here. So for our homework assignment, we were supposed to write two functions, right? A function for converting from decimal to a base, and then another function for converting from a base into decimal. Okay? So, and I mentioned that dividing to get a remainder, you use the double slash, okay? And then you use the percent sign to get the actual remainder portion. So let's write a couple functions here. So we're going to define decimal to base. All right, so this is going to take in two parameters, a decimal number, so we'll call that guy DEC. And then it'll take in the base we want to convert that number to. Okay. Now, I had you read the sections in the book on functions as well as strings, right? Because you're going to be working with strings here as we're building up our guy here. And just for a few minutes, I'm just going to cut this, and let's just experiment with strings a little bit. So I'm going to say S is equal to hello world. All right. And then I'll go ahead and say print S. Save this. I'll just have my terminal open here. I'll go ahead and, well, actually, I want to run Python 3 CSC535.py. So there's my hello world. Okay, fine. So now, what if I want to find a particular character in my string? Okay, because some of the other things you looked at in the book were loops. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the string functions from the string. Here's string methods. So let's look at some of the things we have here. So we can replace characters inside of a string. We can find a character in the string. This is going to be pretty handy for us moving forward as well. So there's two versions. There's find and then there's rfind. Find searches a string from the beginning towards the end and returns the position within the string of the first occurrence of a particular character. So I'm going to say print s dot find, and let's look for an E. All right, so an E is found at position 1 in that string. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So E should return for me up 1 because that's the first place an E was found. So there's my 1. Okay. If I am looking for an L, there happens to be 2 L's here. It'll find it at position 1 instead of, or position 2 instead of position 3 because the first occurrence of L is at position 2. Go ahead and run this. There's my 2. But if I happen to do rfind, gives me a 9 because it's working from the end of the string towards the beginning of the string. Okay, it didn't find me position 3. It found, because what it did is it reversed the string first and then walked it. So if I go back to this guy here, that is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, actually, hold on, that's backwards. What number did it give me? Give me 9 for the first occurrence of L in hello world. Turns the last occurrence in the string at 9. It's a very strange result that just gave me. Oh, it's giving this one. That makes sense. I didn't think that there was more than 2 else. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Last occurrence is at bucket 9. All right. So it gave me the right answer. I just didn't realize that the word world had an L in it. So now we're even. You guys didn't know about Star Trek. I didn't know world had L in it. Okay. I think mine's worse. Okay, I couldn't spell world. All right. So, yeah, it's pretty bad. I told you I have a headache, though. I have an excuse. Any of my mistakes today? Headache. All right. So a couple of things there. We have another function called count. And that returns the number of times a particular string occurs in there. So if I want to... Here, this will be fun for us. We should get a 3 now because there are 3 L's inside of the string S. So let's go ahead and run this guy. So there's my 3. It found 3 L's in there. Okay. So these are some functions that we can use to do different things. These other find ones, they allow us to find a particular thing starting from a particular place in the string. Or we can look for something in between a start and an end position. So if we want to search somewhere in the middle of a string. So this gives us the ability to find some stuff inside of a string. This tells us how many times a certain thing occurs in a string. We have some methods down here that returns whether or not something is a digit, is lowercase, is uppercase, is space, whether it starts with something, whether it ends with something. Let's see what else we got here. We can use something to capitalize the string. So if I come back in here and I say print s dot capitalize, there's hello. Let's see, that's a very strange. So I printed out hello world, that's the top one, but then I said s dot capitalized, and it only gave me, oh, it just capitalizes the first letter instead of doing the whole thing in uppercase. I thought there was another function called title that basically did that too. Oh, first thing, oh, upper makes it all uppercase. Let's see. Title returns a copy of the string as a title with first letters of all words capitalized. So title would work a little different. Title would have hello and world both capitalized. Okay. Let's see. Strip takes away any spaces at the beginning and end of the string. This is a lot of other programming languages call this trim. So for instance, if I go in here and I do a bunch of spaces in the front, a bunch of spaces in the end. When I print it out here, it's going to print it out with all those spaces in there. You know, I bet that trim is a function. Nope, it's not. So they call it strip. So there's strip. Notice we had the extra spaces here, but those spaces were removed here. So strip is a good function. If you aren't sure what kind of user input the user gave you, you can go ahead and just get rid of all the extra crap at the two ends. This does not remove spaces. Notice that world still has that space there. So this just gets rid of extra stuff at both ends. Okay? All right, let's see what else we got here. Okay, so that is our basic string functions for doing things with strings. All right, now, what if I print s at position 0? I should probably take out all my extra spaces because it was actually a space that was at position 0 there. All right, so that gives me my h. S dot length, I think should give me the length of that string. Is it? Actually, I think it's this. So there's the length of s. So the last legal bucket in the string would be its length minus 1. So I'd say s at bucket, length of s minus 1 should give me the d, the last legal thing in that string. Because this guy has a length of 11, but the legal positions are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Last legal position in the string is bucket 10, which is the length minus 1. That makes sense? Okay, so I'll go ahead and run this. This should give us our D. There's the D. All right, so now what would happen if I say S at bucket 0 is equal to a L? What do you think it'll be? Think it'll be an error? Oh, you think it's going to be Lelo? Lelo. Okay. So why do you think it's going to give me an error?
Because you can't just like take out something from the string and put another thing. You can only concatenate.
Okay. So let's go and run this here real quick. There's my error. It says string object does not support item assignment. The word your book might have used is that strings, let me open up are what's called immutable. Not mutable, and mutable is a fancy way of saying changeable. So a string is not mutable, which means we cannot change it. Does that make sense? All right, I don't know why they just don't say not changeable, but tech people want to sound smart, so they use the word mutable, and it's just a thing. All right. Now, what if I want to get a string in the format, well, what if I do want to change bucket 0 of my string? What if I want to change the H to an L? I could replace it, but I would have to, does replace let me choose the index, or does replace say replace all occurrences of H with L? I think the replace function lets me do, yeah, it says, yeah, I could give it a count saying only replace the first one. But I want to talk about direct access to this. So I go back here. I'm going to go back up here to the top, and I want to bring up lists and dictionaries. So I can create well, here, rather than search through there, I'm going to say Python string to list. All right, looks like split. So I'll say S2 is equal to S dot split. And then I'll go ahead and print out S2 here. That's just splitting it on spaces. I don't want to do that. Oh, you just use it as constructor. So I'll say S2 is the list version of S. So there's hello world as a string. Here is hello world as a list with all the individual characters changed. So now I can say S2 at bucket 0 is equal to L. And then I can say S2 is equal to the string version of S2. And then I'll print out S2. Well, it didn't let me convert it back to a string. Still replaced it. So there's a built-in function for this. You join it with it. So then I'll say S2 is equal to the empty string. I actually can I just concatenate? Let me try this real quick, and then I'll. Oh, you have to use join. So there's my Lelo world. So if I really want to replace an element in a string, I can convert it to a list, because lists in Python are mutable. That make sense? So if we need to change something in a collection of stuff, if you read in a string and then you're going to want to modify that some, you might want to turn that string into a list, do all your modifications, then turn it back into a string. And then you have something that looks like a string, but you modified it while it was changeable as a list. That make sense? Okay. All right, so what we just played around with here is we played around with some of the functions that we can do with strings and a couple of things with lists. So hopefully what I'm showing you here is, I mean, I haven't programmed in Python in probably a year, but just with this couple of little exercises here, we're off to the races writing some Python stuff, right? So kind of what I told you, like maybe our first class, is that what we're learning in here is computer programming as a skill set, not a particular language. Okay, so having said this, now let's go and use a couple of these tools to go and try to write some of our functions from our homework assignment. Okay, so let's get rid of this. We'll do define, decimal to base. All right, so in this particular guy, I'm going to be building a string, right? Concatenating onto a string. I'm going to be building it backwards probably, or I'm going to have to reverse it later on. I get to choose. All right, I'm going to keep dividing decimal by base over and over and over again. I need to record the remainder, and then I need to change the value of decimal to its updated value using the double slash for divide by. Okay, so I'm going to use a loop here. Was the last class we had a quiz, the two different kinds of loops, while loop and for loop. So in this case, I want to keep doing something as long as decimal is greater than 0. Okay, so while des greater than 0, as long as that guy is true, I'm going to go ahead and give myself a starting point. We'll call this guy answer. We'll set answer equal to the empty string. While des is greater than 0, we're going to say answer is equal to, and now I need to get my new value, which is going to be des mod base concatenated with answer. So I'm going to build it in reverse, because remember when we do this, when we do the conversion, we do everything and then we read it from bottom up. So I'm actually going to build it backwards by concatenating onto the front of this my remainder, and I'm then putting answer on the end. All right. So now I've stored the remainder. Now I need to say des is equal to des divide base. So I do some integer division on that guy. I actually think Python's not going to care about those semicolons, but that's C, C++. It's programming in C this afternoon. Okay, so that should update des. We're going to keep doing that as long as des is greater than 0. As soon as it becomes 0, we're done. And this guy is going to return the value of answer. All right, then if we want to test this guy, we can say print decimal to base. And let's do our, now we're almost correct here because we haven't done our mapping yet. So we've worked for bases, 1 or 2 through 10 currently. So let's convert the decimal 125 into base, let's do base 2. We'll print that guy. Oh, it doesn't like, okay. I got to do a small little shift here. The string version of that guy. So there's my 111. That should be the number 125. This is the ones place, the 2s, the 4s, the 8s, the 16s, the 32s, the 64. So 64 plus 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 1 is 125. Sounds right. So this is the, what's it, ones place, 2s, 4s, 8s, 16s, 32, 64. So this is 64 plus 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 1 is 125. All right, so that did our conversion. Okay. Now, what this won't work for, though, is it won't work for, well, it'll almost work for, what if I do my, what was it, 2989 into base 16? This should be bad, my favorite hexadecimal number. But if I go and run this right now, it's going to give me the right values. This is an 11 for B, a 10 for A, and a 13 for D. But those guys need to get mapped to the appropriate value. That makes sense? Okay. So we're going to do a little trick to pull this off. So I'm going to create another variable here called map. And well, map must be built into the language. So let's see, alpha map. So this guy, I'll have it with all uppercase things. So A, we're going to have 0 through 9 first. Ay, 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 5, 6. Then so there's my whole alphabet, right? So 0 through 9, and then A through Z. That's all of the values I'll need to represent all the bases that we can represent using the English alphabet. So now what I'll do is when I create my string here of decimal to base, what I'm actually going to say is I want, and I wonder, I might not need to convert it to a string since I'm going to be getting a character here. So I'm going to say alpha map at bucket that. So this guy's going to give me a remainder. So let's say that remainder was 0. The char 0 lives at bucket 0. Let's say it was 10. The char A lives at bucket 10. 13. The char D lives at bucket 13. Does that make sense? So I wrote this string in a very special way that allows me to directly map between this remainder and the character that it should be represented by. If the remainder is 3, I'll go to bucket 3 and get a 3. It's fine. No harm, no foul. Those guys should come out in chars, so I think I can use concatenation with a char and a string. If it yells at me, I'll just have to convert it to a string first. Yeah, so there's my BAD. Does that make sense? Now, most of you, I would have thought, probably would have had kind of some bunch of crazy if statements. Or at least it would have been somewhat common for you to just have a, okay, like, look, if it's anything greater than 9. If it's a 10, it's an A. If it's an 11, it's a B. If it's a 12, it's a C. Blah, 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 blah. That's okay. You know, it works, right? This is more of a, not really a trick. It should make sense how it works. But we had to put together a couple of ideas in order to come up with this guy, right? All right, so this should be beneficial to us. You know, if so, let me just say, are there any questions about this? This little trick like this is something that's going to benefit you in a lot of different problems. Kind of a helpful. Strings are pretty important in modern programming languages. So if you can move things into strings and go and search for things in that string and then you know, split the strings up, that kind of stuff, it's pretty helpful. So if you can get stuff into strings, that's beneficial. All right, so questions about decimal to base. Good on that one? Huh? Oh, for me? I just learned Python a few minutes ago. But I like doing this in class for multiple reasons. Obviously, I've been programming longer than you guys have, right? But the point is that I really haven't programmed in Python in a while, so it's not fresh in my mind. But you've seen me sit here just for a few minutes and kind of like, it was like work out the kinks, right? Kind of like when you just get back to playing some sport you haven't played in a while. And you just kind of mess around with it for a few minutes, all of a sudden it starts coming back to you. Okay? But the punchline also, for most of you, this function would have taken a little bit to write. Probably took many of you a long time to write this, and you ran into all sorts of problems and things like that. The reason I like to do live programming in class is so that you see that it's possible. right? So an older guy who's forgotten a whole bunch of crap can do this in a relatively short period of time. So can you once you got some experience, right? It's all, this is all reality. I'm not performing some sort of crazy magic trick up here. Okay, so now let's write, what's the other one? Base 2 decimal, right? Base 2 decimal. And this guy's going to take in a, I'm going to call it a string value, because we're going to be kind of representing our value as a string. And then the base that string is in. Okay? And my job is to convert that guy into the decimal version of that. Okay? So just like before, let's make this guy work for all the bases less than, or 10 or less first. And then I'll show you the little trick for that guy. So when we think about converting from some base to a to decimal, I always start at the far end of it, right? So I'm getting it as a string. What's the last legal bucket in a string? It's that string's length minus 1. How long is this string? It's the length of that string. That's how long it is. That'll be some number. Okay? And the very far right thing is always the ones place. Correct? So I'm going to create a little variable here called place. Set that equal to 1. And place should keep getting multiplied by base as we move to the left, right? If we're doing base 2, place goes from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16. If we're doing base 10, it's 1 to 10 to 100, so on and so forth. All right? Now I'm going to create a loop that's going to start at the end of that thing and go all the way back towards the beginning of that thing. So we need to go back and we need to look in our book at for loops and how we can write a for loop that goes, well, we can either go forwards and fudge the math, or we can go backwards. I think there's a thing called like step -1, if I remember correctly. So we'll go to loops. We'll go to counting loops, for loops. For loops are good. Let's go back to a counting loop. Still going to be a for loop. I guess I could do it in a while loop, but it's kind of the wrong tool for this. Counting using the range function. Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, here we go. Range 5 to 0, step by -1. That guy. So I think it's like 4, some value in that range. Let's see if they give me an example. For this variable in that range. Okay. So we're going to say range length -1 to, I think we need to say 0 because, or say -1 because it'll only count down to 0. 5. Yeah, so this goes from 5 down to 1. I actually needed to go to bucket 0 because the legal buckets in my string are 0 to length -1. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to create a loop. So I'm going to say for I in range, I want to go from the length of string value -1 down to -1. That means I'll stop at 0. It'll include 0. And the size steps I want to take are -1 size steps. That way I'll go from like 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, then to 0, including the 0. Okay, so this will start I off at the last legal bucket of my string. It'll keep going all the way to -1, not including -1, so it'll stop at 0, and it will step by -1 each time. All right, and then what do I want to do? I want to take the current value in my string and multiply it by the place. Right, current value of my string and multiply it by the place. Now, I can use a similar trick to what I had up here. Okay, so I have my whole alphabet. Now, if I tried to take the character 3 and multiply it by 1, what am I going to get? I'm going to get whatever the Unicode value of 3 is times 1, which is going to give me, whatever 3 is. 3 is 80 something, whatever it is. I think it's less than that. It's 30 something. All right, not the number version of it. I want 3 to be a 3. How can I get a 3 for the char 3 out of that string? Find. So the find function we looked at a few minutes ago returns for us the position within the string that a character is first found. Or, and this is an important part for other problems, a -1 if it could not find it. Sometimes you might want to know, is something not there? If something's not there, find will return a -1. All right, so what I'll do as I'm going through here is I'm going to be building up a sum. So I'll start my sum off at 0. Sum a built-in thing? We'll just call it answer. Okay, so we'll say answer, and each time through we'll say answer is equal to answer plus. This is the plus operator instead of the concatenation operator this time because we're working with numbers, not strings. So, and then I want to add to it alphamap dot find. And what am I searching for? I'm searching for string value at bucket I. So this is the current character I'm looking at in my string. I'm going to look for that guy inside of alphamap, which is going to give me, if it was an A, that'll give me a 10. If it was an F, that'll give me a 15. If that was a 2, that'll give me a 2. Make sense? That I can do math with. So I'm going to multiply place times that numeric value and add it onto my answer. Can I squeeze this over? There we go. And then the for loop is just going to naturally go down to 0. Each time through, we want to say place is equal to place times base. So place becomes a multiple of the base. Starts off at 1. If we're dealing with base 2, it'll be a 2 the next time, then a 4, then an 8, then a 16, 32, 64, so on and so forth. In the end, I'm going to return answer. All right, and that should be base to decimal, and this guy will work for all bases because I've already used this trick here. So I'll go ahead and say print base to decimal. I'll pass in BAD, tell them that that is currently in base 16, and this should give me 2989 as my answer. There's my 2989. Make sense? All right, questions about that?
By default, in Python, we have an integer function that displays the value.
So an integer function that displays the value of a decimal?
Yeah, it's like just like what you wrote. Int.
Well, where?
No.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So yeah, I can do something like this, and I can do like 123, and that'll, so if I say +1,
No, it's just like.
well, just watch this. So if I say +1, this will give me a 124. So there's my 124, because that proves it turned it into an integer. As opposed to if I do that, I'll get 1, 2, 3, 1. Because this will be treated as concatenation because this side's a string. So what he's saying is we have a function called int that will take a string like this and turn it into a number. So what he was doing probably is saying place times the int version of that guy, which will give me a number to do math with, right? So if I do that, it's not going to work for any bases greater than 10, right? Because it's not going to be able to convert a B into an 11. But I can say something like, well, here, 127 from base 10 to base 10. Well, I'll leave those other things just so you see the difference here. This will be the number 123. This will be the string 123. So this guy down here will print out 1, 2, 3, 1 because I'm concatenating a 1 onto this string. This guy will print out 124. Actually, this guy might be an error because I think that concatenation in Python, if I remember correctly, requires both sides to be a string. Yeah. So there, your 1, 2, 3, 1. But there's our 127 from base 10 to base 10 using your int thing, which is fine, but that doesn't save us for the A through Z stuff.
So I have a small bit. I did not write the entire code like this, but I just wrote a single line of code. It is just like a int, open the braces, and then double quote each of them, and just wrote like any of the number, comma, and then I wrote the base number.
Oh, yeah. So there's a built-in function. Yeah. So you cheated. So what he's saying here is I can print out, for example, an A in base 16 should give me a 10. There's the 10. All right. Which, at the end of the day, is really the same thing as my little map thing, right? It's accomplishing the same thing. But, you know, the real problem with this is if I say BAD in base 16, it'll give me 2989. So that kind of does your homework for you is the point. Did you do it all the way for that?
No.
Okay, so it's okay to use shortcuts like that. I mean, that's a built-in function that makes converting between bases and stuff friendly. Okay, but we saw it's not that hard to just write it, correct? In fact, let me get that guy up there back to the full version because I really don't want to have to type it again. There we go. All right, so that's the full version of that guy again. So it's 2989. So we saw that working through this algorithm, I mean, it wasn't so much that we're converting numbers, just we've been practicing converting numbers. So that was something that should have been pretty fresh in our mind. Also, it's something that we've had enough practice with that we know the pattern of it now. So it's a good thing to go and turn into an algorithm because one of the things we want to practice is writing little solutions to problems. So it's fine that there's a built-in function that does the same thing for us, and you can use that now. But until you understand how it actually works under the hood, I mean, it works probably like this under the hood. You know, really, this function is called int, right? This is the int function. Takes in a string and takes in the base that that string's in and spits out the decimal equivalent. That's what that function is, right? It's the function that you mentioned. So, you know, we wrote it ourselves here. And hopefully you see that neither of these functions were overly difficult. I'm sure it took you plenty of time to write them, but in the end, the difficulty wasn't because of their length. The difficulty was because you're beginners at programming. That make sense?
Except for the int one, but we cannot get the user input for that. The building function, we cannot get the user input.
Well, sure you could.
Yeah.
How do we get user input? Just input?
Yeah.
What is it? Input. Give me number, something like that. And then I'll go ahead and print out val plus 1 because I think this is going to come in as a string. Yeah, it came in as a string. So if I want that guy to be an int, I would convert this to an integer. So input, give me a number. It's going to come in as an int. Now I'll be able to do math with it. There's my 11. So you were trying to, I mean, you should be able to do, something like that. Ask him for the number, ask him for the base, and it'll convert that number. It'll actually go the other way. So this will say, if I give it BAD and I give it the base, so actually what you want is something like this. You don't want the integer version of that. So I'll put in BAD as my number, and then I'll put in 16 as my base. Now it'll give me 2989. So BAD is my number, 16 is my base, there's my 2989. What were you trying to do?
Yeah, but I got the error for that. In the online compiler, I got the error for that.
Oh, like it didn't work in the... I wonder if the online compiler was using 2.7. It's possible. Well, here, we can test it. Because I happen to have 2.7 on here. No, works at 2.7. That's 2.7. So I don't know. I don't know why the online compiler wouldn't have worked. My guess is that probably you wrote something a little different. It's probably similar, but probably one little tiny difference. All right. All right. Questions about any of that? Good stuff? Fun? Difficult? I just learned Python.
You're different.
I'm just giving you a hard time. I know. It was supposed to be difficult. Yeah, it's supposed to be. So, but remember, I promised you that day one, didn't I? Did I tell you that programming was hard? Day one, I told you programming was hard. I've been doing this since I was 9. Okay, and I was 9. I turned 13 a couple months ago, so I've been doing this 4 years. I've been doing this a while. All right, so I didn't just start programming and was instantly pretty good at it. All right, so I referenced day one. I said it's kind of like a sport, right? You just got to put in a lot of time, and that's why I like programming live in front of classes, so you see that it's possible. Does that make sense? You know, I mean, I'm pretty good at what I do, but there's other people that program very well as well. So it's completely attainable. Somebody can sit up here and write code like this pretty quickly because it's not that difficult once you've been writing code for a while. Just like several of you might be very accomplished soccer players, where I would be a complete noob at soccer. So you might be able to kind of dribble the ball down the pitch with some competency, where I'd be tripping over my feet and stuff like that. It wouldn't go well. That makes sense? Same mentality should go through your head here. All right, so let's take about a 10-minute break, stretch out. We'll come back and we'll start talking about our next stuff. I want to start working with lists and dictionaries some. And I'll post this code up on Slack as well, so you have a starting point. Or if you have, our example.